Let's chat about what the topic is for today. Um, and so Deborah and I, as said, right, built a company around this topic. We're also gonna share a bit about what we're building, but like the first part, and I think that's super relevant for everyone, is we're gonna talk about why ROI is actually important, like what the benefit is, and how do you actually track that, right? Because I think the biggest piece is no one, like 90% of organizations can't really tell you yet their AI ROI. And we spend hundreds of hours with IT leaders. And the big piece is that they don't necessarily know what to track and that they don't have the right data at hand. And so today we just want to talk about, hey, how could you actually think about ROI? Why is that so important? What does that mean from a tech perspective and from a value perspective, right? And when we think about return on investment, like what are the things on the return side to track for the most current use cases? But then also on the investment side. So like what do we need to watch out there for? And then I would love to keep like 20 minutes in the end, just to chat with people about how do you currently do that in your organization, right? Is that something you actually value? Is that something you're getting pushback from leadership, right? Because we heard that a lot. So I also want to make this an open discussion. And so right now we see two different like types of groups that care about why about AI ROI. The one part is really like people who sell, right? So like agent platforms, those vendors who right now build agentic workflows. And so their main motivation that we keep hearing is like, hey, we need to make sure I can show to my customer what value I'm actually providing them, right? So I also need to think about how do I make sure my client in the end gets the most out of this and gets the most ROI. But then also when I'm buying AI solutions, how do I make sure I justify what I'm getting here and also that I can gauge, does this actually have the value that I'm paying for, right? So like those two motivations, I think very important for both sides to consider. Um, Unfortunately, both sides right now really struggle to measure this, right? And that is not just across, that's like not just a siloed challenge. Why is that so important, right? Right now, a lot of Gen AI projects fail. I know this was a huge outcry last year, right? So everyone probably doesn't want to hear that stat anymore. But a lot of transformations fail. And this year, only 14% of people actually said that they see real impact, right? And whenever we don't see impact, that's when it starts getting tricky, right? Because I think we all agree that AI is adding value, but making sure we focus on the right things that at the biggest value is like super crucial. And then also as we roll out AI in organizations, like how do we make sure we roll it out in the right areas where I have the highest ROI and like where can I tell that I now have achieved my target ROI? So I think like super important here. And two stats that I found super cool, and this is going to be stat heavy because I love this stuff, is that 90% of CIOs actually plan to increase AI spend, right? And we don't want to do that blind, right? We really want to understand if I increase my spend, where should I do this? Should I like, because we don't have unlimited money, right? Should I focus that on coding, for example? Should I give my developers more tokens? Should I increase my customer service use cases? So really thinking about how do I increase spend in the right areas. Um, and then the biggest piece I think we see with AI changing is that the business context on what we spend on is growing more. So like before in tech, right? Like very more straightforward use cases we would spend on cloud, we would spend on data, but now with AI, we're spending on actual business processes, right? I'm no longer just spending on cloud in a siloed way, but it's more a vehicle to make tech happen. So we now also need to change the way we judge return on investment for tech investments. And so I think the big piece now is we really need to think about how do we differentiate ourselves there, right? And how do we realize the full value of our agentic use cases? And that's where AI comes, or like ROI comes into place. Because those who already measure this and who do a really good job, they're the ones that see EBITDA uplift, right? So they see actual profitability increases, and they see like a 3 to 1 dollar ratio of dollars invested versus return. So if we do this right, this could be a huge, huge, huge benefit for every single organization. So we just want to make sure we measure this and we have a way to actually see where to invest and where to grow the right use case. I found this Gartner report super cool because it actually says, hey, like a ton of enterprises are planning to increase spend. But now more of that AI spend is actually going into different business departments instead of just staying under AI. And that's probably something you all see, right? Like there's a sales team that's now all of a sudden spending on AI. And there's a customer service team that's spending on AI. And all of those different units own now some portion of the tech spend, right? And they spend on different AI tools, they spend on different agentic use cases, which when I'm selling into those, right, as an AI seller, I think that's a great way to show like siloed ROI, right? But when I'm buying all of those different tools, it gets really hard at the top to roll all of these costs up. And so super important to get that cross-unit visibility very right up front to be actually able to say, here's how much value we're adding and not to have overlapping costs. Then I think the third piece, and that's what I'm hearing a lot as we talk to CIOs, is that a ton of them are actually struggling to prioritize what is the right outcome and where do I double down on my energy, right? Because I think in a perfect world, we would have enough energy, enough resources in a company to invest in every single AI use case, but this is not reality. So right now we need to make decisions, right? On where do we roll something out first? Where do we double down on? Like where are actually like the biggest were actually like the biggest opportunities for us in AI. But like more than 70% of CIOs who oftentimes run those AI transformations, they actually can't tell you that. And they don't know what to prioritize. So here also, in my view, you need to prioritize what gets you the best business outcome because we're like not all in this, like we're not in this for fun, right? We want to improve a business, we want to improve the bottom line. So like really thinking about growing the use cases that have the highest business outcome is super important. And then the stat here, the 63%, is something that should be interesting for everyone that sells into enterprises. Those enterprises right now will start scrutinizing the AI spend. And we've heard that from a ton of CFOs we've been speaking with. If you can no longer prove a clear ROI of your solution, you're no longer going to be purchased by those enterprises. So like CIOs really are under pressure to show accountability of their spend. In 2025, there were a lot of pilots, right? But also there were a lot of pilots that didn't go anywhere and that didn't deliver results. So finance leaders are starting to pressure the tech side much more. And so measuring the right outcomes and like finding the good way to do this is super crucial. But this is not that easy. So the main issue I was describing earlier, right? Like cost and value are two sides of that coin when we think about return on invest of an AI solution. But right now, this is super disconnected, and everyone who's been dealing with AI costs probably has seen that before, right? So like tech costs are siloed across the different tech teams, and then what we see as value, that's usually occurring on the business side. But right now, there's no way to connect all three of them, so you need a different new data layer. Then at the same time, a lot of the vendors, I was talking about vendors who sell the AI solutions, right? They're moving to outcome-based pricing. So Sierra, great example. They're no longer selling like flat fee rate or like a seat-based fee, but they're actually selling cost, like they're selling per answered ticket when they do customer service tickets, which is super cool for them, right? It's such a win-win. I only pay you when I actually, like, I only get paid when I actually do a successful job for you. That's amazing. But I was recently at a conference where a CFO was sharing they do a similar ticket model that sometimes it actually costs them $4 to respond to one of those tickets and they get $1 back to the customers, right? So that new pricing model also presents a huge risk for organizations that sell outcome based. And since there are more of them, right, we need a different type of visibility on the cost side of this like investment coin. And then the third piece, and that's probably something every developer here knows, is that AI is not just impacting token spend rate. And I think there were like a lot of discussions on token spends the past like few months, and also before that, token was like the biggest thing people were watching. But we also heard from a lot of IT leaders that all of a sudden their Databricks costs were increasing, their cloud costs were growing through the roof, right? So those like full tech stack costs are a piece that a lot of different organizations aren't monitoring. And then we also heard that sometimes those agents are starting to have loops, a ton of retries, right? If the agent workflow isn't built successfully and isn't optimized yet. And so that leads to a lot of additional spend that a lot of folks aren't monitoring today. So also watch outs there that we wanted to bring up. Let me go on the cost challenge a bit more because I know there are like a few engineers here, right, who are starting to build out workflows. Um, So what we heard from folks and what we've seen when we built this ourselves, because Deborah is an AI engineer, is that your agent, right, is not non-deterministic in terms of their cost, right? And every engineer here will know this, but I think finance leaders don't always know this, at least the ones I've been speaking to. And transparently, when I was deep diving into the topic, I also did not realize that, even though it's very logical, right? My agent is tasked to perform a task for me and to perform an outcome for me, right? So if I'm asking him, to give me as a user. I have a chatbot that I'm using. What did I actually buy in the last year? Can be super easy to get a response for me, right? For me as a user, maybe I have like one different, like I've like only purchased at Amazon once. And so it just has like one try, directly goes to the database, finds information about me, like uses an LLM for that, right? Databricks and Pinecone for like the data storage and the activity there. So like very easy to resolve my customer service question. Cost my organization that's building the customer service bot 10 cents to respond. But what if I do that again and I'd ask about a different piece of question? What did I buy in the last year? And I'm a user that has actually purchased a lot, right? My agent might have to do several retries, might have to go across different systems, and might have to go back and forth, and might run into an agent loop here. And so my costs here are 5xing. That's something my engineering team, or like 15xing, sorry. That's something my engineering team doesn't necessarily see, right? Because right now a ton of teams don't have that visibility. Still, at the end of the month, this bill is going to hit me, right? And that I think is a big challenge that if you don't have the right visibility on like cost outcome and really look at it from a how much does it cost me to solve like one successful task, right? My agent task is supposed to answer me. If you don't have the right visibility there, that can lead to huge cost increases. And that's what we already see across the board. That's like what's happening right now. A ton of the leaders in enterprises that we spoke to, they told us when they go from pilot to production with use cases, they're seeing a 15x increase, sometimes more, in costs because those variances, you don't necessarily see them in a pilot set. And also here, probably engineers know this. But now business owners own the AI cost, right? And I can only talk about myself. That's something I've been learning over the past few months. And so when we think about AI workflows, right, this new world where we're talking about return on invest, we really need to answer four different pieces. And that's like a big piece we want to just like make sure everyone has top of mind. We need to understand how much does it cost me to deliver one successful outcome, right? So that can be answering one successful customer service ticket, easiest one, right? Generating one lead for my client. How much is actually the end-to-end cost across my full tech stack? Then I do want to understand, is my AI use case actually increasing my profit or lowering my cost, right? Especially as finance leaders, everyone probably will agree. That's the biggest piece, right? As said earlier, like it's great that my agent performed a ton of activity, but if I run a business and I don't see an increase of profit at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it's actually adding so much value, right? There are softer value factors, right? So if my clients are happier, that's amazing, right? Like that's a great thing to spend time on, but ultimately that should also lead to them buying more or staying with me longer. So like ultimately that even if they're happier, that should reduce my churn so that I get more money from them. Or it should reduce my cost to serve them, right? Because they're happier, they will use customer service less, so that should reduce my cost. And then also in the long run, like all of this needs to increase my like my profitability, which is something the industry is betting heavily on, right? Like private equity is going more in this space. Everyone's kind of like really pushing on the value increase of AI, but like quantifying that and making sure you have the right quantification there, is still a tricky piece. And then the other portion that we keep hearing a lot is that enterprises don't just start one transformation with AI right now. They're actually starting to put AI into a range of different use cases. So they're thinking about an AI portfolio that they're having in place. So not just sales, but sales, customer service, engineering, like all of these things are being kicked off right now at the same time. So I also want to understand which of my use cases now is already delivering the max ROI, which of my vendors is actually doing super well, right? So if I'm testing Sierra versus Decagon, which of them is better? Like, how do I make that decision? How do I test this? It should be which of them is actually delivering the best business outcome for me, and that's cost and value increase. And then the last piece that we're heavily looking into right now is how actually am I doing with all of this compared to my peers, right? I think that is super interesting as more and more people actually roll out AI. I really want to understand, am I the best at doing this? Because in the end, companies who roll out AI, it's a competitiveness factor as well, right? I want to make sure that when I roll out an AI strategy, I do this really well. I do this at the highest pace, and I get the max outcome out of it because tech is still a differentiating factor, and it's a competitive advantage. And so those four questions, I think everyone will kind of have top of mind going forward when they're being asked, what is my return on invest from my AI strategy? I've been talking now for 20 minutes. Let me take a quick break. Are there any questions up to here in the audience? Otherwise, we can also respond to them in like the last 20 minutes. So feel free if there are like follow-on questions, put them in the chat, let us know. Okay.
Can I
Then,
ask you a question?
yes, go for it.
So in your opinion, Alina, um, what are the best, most cost-effective tools that any business should employ um, in order to massively increase their ROI
Hmm.
from AI?
Great question. I think I would go by it by domains. The ones where we already see a ton of improvements are those four. Tools, though, that will depend on how well the tool is performing for you. That's why we're now going to go over for each of those. How do you measure return, right? Like for each of them, you kind of need a business KPI. I do see a lot of coding tools work really well whether Cursor or Gemini, like, like whether Cursor, Codex, Claude Code is better for you, that's something I would propose to test based on value metrics. So I'm going to go over that in a bit. But I think that's a really, really good question. And that goes also to the like value intelligence, right? Who's performing best? But I would say customer service is something we see a ton, a ton. Um, yeah, we see like a ton of folks already jumping into customer service. So I'd say that is one where we see a lot of improvement. Sales is another one. We're currently working with a sales startup, and they see a ton of focus as well. So like anything where like a sales agent can take over lead follow-ups, right? Lead gen, those things are great. And then coding, I think, is a non-negotiable right now. Like if someone doesn't use coding tools, like I would highly doubt that they're like gonna be here if they're a tech firm or like even if they have tech employees. I think the next 2 years are gonna be very challenging for them. Yeah.
What if say because currently I'm working on a hard tech startup. So
Hmm.
what in your opinion are would be the best tools for me to employ as an early stage startup?
Yeah. In MarTech, I would say probably some type of lead generation, right? Because you want to make sure you sell better to your clients. So like some sorts of that. And then I would say like some internal processes, right? So like note taking those pieces, great. Just like to free up a lot of your time from busy work. Then pipeline activations, those things are really cool, actually, I would say. I can use my example. I use Notion and Cloud Cowork for a lot of that. Depending on which tool you want to use. I think like the vendor, I don't want to make a call on at the moment. But think about repetitive workflows that you have in your organization, right? And for me, that's I jump on a client call. I want the meeting to be recorded. I want to take notes after. That's something I can easily automate. If you do MarTech, right, coding should be top of your stack, right? Like you obviously probably have that already. I know Deborah like is using multiple of the coding tools and has them test against each other, right? How sophisticated you get, I think, is the question of how well it's working for you. But I'd say coding non-negotiable.
If I can answer that
And
question
then
real quick.
yeah.
The models out there, they're already fantastic. You can use any model and they're all of them are good. But the execution and the outcome kind of also depends on your system. So that is a decision that you would have to make after you use them or for your system and see how what value you are getting. So again, a model A can be great, or system A can be great, a vendor A can be great for one company, but may not be great for you because the execution matters more. And that is a call that you would have to make after you measure these values. I hope that answered the question. Alina, you can take over.
No worries. That's great. And really good question. And actually kind of a good segue to where we see a lot of the spend is going already. Because I think those are the easiest use cases to start with, but they're also like generating a ton of value. The first one is sales, right? I think like easy sell, like help my clients to make more money. But then also for sales folks, right? Like that's the best way to automate parts of your front office. To increase the value and like leverage AI. Second one we see is customer service, right? There are already a lot of agents were deployed, but now the big difference is they're working because the models are getting better, voice agents are getting much better. Coding, I mentioned as well, right? And IT service management, all of those have in common that they're super repetitive. So great for AI to take over. And now I think this piece is the most interesting. How do you actually track value, right? Because it needs to be targeted to your actual business use case. I think the big challenge that a lot of leaders are running into is that they want to quantify the value without thinking of those pieces from a business sense. So I want to make sure that for each of my business use cases, right, where I'm using AI, I actually also think about what are the business capabilities that I'm making better. So for sales, for my agent here, I would want to understand, does it actually get me more meetings with my clients? The portion of AI pipeline, basically. Does it help me win more deals? Does it make my teams faster? And does it help me like in general win like a larger sum of those deals? So as you can see, those aren't different than the KPIs that I would measure a sales team on. And I think that's the big piece. We should measure like AI tools the way we also measure humans performing those tools. And that's the key piece. We want to make sure we like embed in every workflow that's AI enabled. So my sales agent, my human agent also would have to generate pipeline, right? Would have to generate me meetings. And in the end would have to make money for me. So like we'll have to close those meetings. So when I implement a sales agent that's a tech version of this, right? No longer a human, those are the same KPIs I should measure this from as well to actually say, does this work for me or not? Second, on customer service, right? Are my customers getting happier after solving this ticket? Did I save churn, right? So like, are my customers staying with me if I answer their tickets correctly? And then the last one, hey, can I actually do this with less people, right? Because that's ultimately also some piece we're betting on that like some of the labor in those certain processes is going to be removed, whether that's shifted. I do think there's going to be a big labor shift, right? But like that's kind of we're trying to also swap some of the human labor with agent layer for this so that humans can actually focus on higher adding value use cases. The third part coding, we spent a lot of time on that. Those I think are five really good metrics to measure it. But one thing we see a ton of people do is they measure lines of code that AI is generating. And I don't think that's the right metrics to measure, right? Because here also we want to measure an outcome. So we're proposing to measure your number of PRs merged and deployed, the time it took you to merge them. Is your code getting better? So are there less bugs in there? And then ultimately, what's the feature throughput you have, right? Because the AI should get me in a place where I have like a higher productivity and not just more output. Because we all know there's AI slop out there, so we don't want to make sure we confuse output with actually outcomes. And then the last one, IT service management, we see a ton of folks implement already. So number of tickets deployed is a great one, number of tickets auto-solved. And then also incidents prevented, right? So here also traceability is a big piece, making sure you have the right visibility on which portion of this AI did. But also like improving your basic business KPIs you had on those use cases and not coming up with new metrics, right? Because AI is supposed to be your coworker, right? It's supposed to help you with your core processes and with your core business domains. So why would we measure it based on different KPIs than I had in my business before? And now when we think about these scorecards, right, we really want to understand what is the total cost to think about those use cases. So model, including all the retries I was talking about earlier, right, but also infrastructure and data costs, and then attributing the value. So really understanding unit economics for my AI-driven workflow. What was the value that I actually generated, and what were the costs for it? So looking at it from a unit economics perspective. And then rolling this up, right? Making sure you have a higher level view that you can report to your CFO, to your CIO, to the budget holder, so you can kind of justify where is this working and where isn't this working. And maybe, Deborah, in a second, we can show how we do this. No long demo. We don't want to bore people with a vendor demo. But we thought like heavy about this topic. And so we've not seen any tool match any of this before, right? Because I worked on those, like the job I did before basically ended here. We would tell people, here's everything you can do with AI, and here's the estimated value out of it. But then when you roll this out, you want to make sure you have the right visibility, right? To understand, is my AI strategy actually delivering the value? And so we figured if there's no product out there, let's build this ourselves, right? Because we're super interested in that. We know a ton of people are asking those questions right now. And so what we do at Botano, and happy to share like our contacts after, is that we look at business and tech data and create an ROI layer that stretches across all of your use cases. And we use a range of different data inputs. Also happy to talk about that later on, but we want to understand, what does your run workflow do, right? Where does it run? What are the costs that it's actually occurring? What is the system of record, right? So like for sales, it's my customer service, or like my CRM that I'm connecting to. And then we want to understand, hey, is this better than before? So we look at industry baselines. And that helps us answer the four question I was talking about earlier. Maybe we go into what this looks like. Deborah, do you want to show a quick demo? We can't hear you right now.
Yes, let me share my screen real quick. So as the head of engineering or CTO, I want to see what are my different workflows in my company and how much I'm spending for all of these different workflows. So what I'm currently getting is bills from different vendors. I have my OpenAI bill, Claude bill, data bill, infrastructure bill, but none of them have a line item that says this is the workflow cost, this is the like the value you're getting. None of that shows all that. So what I can do is come to Botanu and look at the use case and look at what is the total cost to serve this to my customers. So that can be looking at what is the total daily spend, how much successful outcomes I'm getting, and understanding the cost distribution. As Selena mentioned earlier, that the cost we have AI cost is non-deterministic, and you have this whole distribution, so you can decide, do you want 50 percentile of the cost of, sorry, 95 percentile cost is too much for you, so you can set budgets correctly and make sure you manage the cost tail better, and also understanding the cost variance. So this helps you understand, okay, why did my own bills increase this week by 3% or something like that? Understanding your own bills, how much are you paying your vendors, OpenAI, AWS, or different tools that you're using, and also understanding the token economics. So this is the cost view we are showing. And then we also show the value piece, which shows, okay, so how much did my system get better after using this agent? So this is a customer ticket resolution agent. So what is the efficiency? What is the cost of the ticket per resolution? What is the time to resolution? And how did that improve? So it was 3 minutes before, now it's 8 seconds now. So we can show improvements in the system, and then you can measure the soft and the hard savings as well. So hard savings we are measuring in terms of the cost reduced, and the soft savings in terms of the improvements to the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. And like as you guys can see here, what I was showing earlier, right? Like we do want to measure business specific KPIs. So if this is a ticket triaging, right, I do want to see how accurate was that ticket, right? How are the cost per ticket, and not make it an arbitrary metric, but really make it a business specific piece for that use case. So super crucial here. Amazing. Then I'm just gonna go over like a few more pieces before we have a ton of time for Q&A. So the big pieces we're doing today, We haven't seen comparable vendors out there. So what we've heard from folks is that they do this manually today, is that they look at the different spend items, right? So we would like roll up all of the vendors because yeah, as you're asking, right? Like we want to make sure you have probably everyone has like 10, 15, 20 AI vendors in their organization. How much are we actually spending on them? What are the use cases? What are the teams? And who's performing well? So we roll up like a range of the different vendors. Really look at value attribution. So what's the business outcome and what are the costs for that you could see earlier, right? And then digging a bit deeper into this. Am I really using my licenses, right? We found people usually save there between 15 to 20%. I did hear from a ton of people who have 4, 5 different coding assistant tools, which is great, I think, to give every employee a lot of selections, right? And to not have a vendor lock-in. But if they charge per seat, maybe then I can have a renegotiation with my vendor if I only utilize 60% of those licenses, right? So really looking at, am I using the licenses correctly? And then I think super crucial with any vendor, right? We really want to make sure everyone's security aligned. And then a big piece we're like taking a lot of value on is like looking specifically on is outcome evaluation. So just because your agent performs an activity doesn't mean that they were successful, right? And that they actually delivered an outcome for you. If I have a lead gen sales agent and it does a lot, but it doesn't ever create any really good leads for me, then that was a successful business outcome, right? So just because my agent had a lot of activity, we shouldn't just say it was successful, but it should actually deliver me business outcomes, not just vanity outcomes. We also wouldn't keep a sales rep in who just talks to a lot of customers but never closes a deal, right? That's like not value adding. And then whenever you work with us at Botanu, right, like we're obviously like having a white glove setup. I think that's the super important piece that we see a lot of people do right now, right? Forward deployed engineering, making sure the custom fit is there for you and that we track like the right KPIs for you as an organization and for the different use cases. So before we go to Q&A, just recapping a few of the pieces, right? AI ROI is going to be the question of this year. If people don't show ROI, already 40% of companies are saying that they will cancel their projects, right? Important for sellers. So like really important to always, if you have an agent startup, make sure you show the return on investment and you give people that number regularly. If you can't do this yourself, let us know. Happy to work with you. But if you track this yourself, like please do, because that is the determining factor for renewals. And then if you don't track ROI, that I said earlier, your rollout is likely not going to be successful, right? The leaders who are like doing really well with AI, they have really good visibility and how well the use case is performing and what business value this is all adding. Then when you think about costs, make sure you look across the full tech stack. You don't just look at LLM spend, you really look across all of your different tech infrastructure components. And thinking of it in a unit economics perspective is super helpful just to think about did this activity now justify the tech costs to not run out of scope there. And then making sure every single workflow survives your questions on, is it worthwhile the spend? What's the value that's getting me? How well is it performing in my portfolio, right? Is it worth spending the time on this? And how well am I actually doing on this as I progress versus others in my industry to make sure I have my AI competitive advantage? Amazing. In case someone wants to test out Botanu, we're going to share this after as well, right? Feel free to scan the code here, put yourself on the sign up list. I can post the link as well in a bit. Let us know. Happy to, yeah, work with anyone in this group here, seller, buyer, like happy to chat.